The rain was falling with a fierce, cold intensity that made every street look like a trembling river of shadows. It was the kind of night where most people hurried home, holding their breath as if the darkness itself carried secrets they didn't dare question. But for Daniel Carter, a tired single father working double shifts at a small hardware store, and his little daughter Emily, who clung to his hand with trust bigger than the world, this night would become the moment that changed everything. Because on that soaked, silent road, beneath a flickering street lamp, they found a stranger, broken, bleeding, and barely breathing. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of humanity, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Daniel had always lived carefully, quietly, choosing order over chaos after losing his wife to an unexpected illness 3 years earlier. Emily was his reason to keep moving, her tiny voice the only melody in the house that once held laughter from every corner. He tried to stay strong for her, tried to hide the exhaustion in his bones, but she saw it anyway. Children always do. They were walking home from the shop that night, sharing half an umbrella because the wind had already stolen the other half. Emily complained of her shoes sinking in puddles, but Daniel gently teased her to keep her spirits up. They had no idea that destiny was waiting for them between the cracks in the pavement. The first thing they noticed was the hand. Pale. Motionless. Half hidden under a collapsed cardboard box near the dumpster behind an old bakery. Daniel's instinct told him to walk faster, to protect Emily, to avoid unnecessary danger. But Emily, with her innocent heart and fearless compassion, squeezed his hand and whispered that someone needed help. And it was that whisper, gentle yet powerful, that pulled Daniel toward the stranger lying in the cold rain. The man looked no older than 40. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, and his breaths shallow, each one sounding like a final attempt to cling to life. For a moment, Daniel felt frozen, gripped by fear of the unknown. But then he remembered how many strangers had offered him kindness when he was left alone to raise Emily. He remembered how it felt to be drowning and still hoping for a hand to reach out. That he knelt beside the stranger, checking his pulse with trembling fingers. It was faint but present. Daniel quickly removed his coat and covered the man, shielding him from the cold, while Emily held the umbrella above them despite the rain splashing onto her small shoulders. Every second felt like a battle. Daniel called for help, but the nearest paramedics were delayed due to the storm. They were told it would take time the stranger didn't have. And so, Daniel did what his heart told him was right. He lifted the man onto his back and carried him home, step by step, every muscle burning yet refusing to stop. Emily ran beside him, scared yet determined, whispering little encouragements to her father, urging him not to give up. Their small apartment wasn't meant for emergencies. It was barely big enough for the two of them, but that night it became a sanctuary. Daniel laid the stranger on the couch, cleaned his wounds with whatever supplies he had, and gave him warm water slowly. Emily fetched towels, blankets, and her favorite stuffed toy, placing it beside the stranger like a silent blessing. Hours passed. The wind howled outside, the storm raged on, and inside, Daniel watched over the man as if protecting him from the world itself. Emily eventually fell asleep on the floor, curled up beside the blanket-covered stranger. By dawn, the storm had cleared, but uncertainty filled the room thicker than any fog. When the stranger finally opened his eyes, confusion and pain reflected in them. Daniel explained what had happened, expecting gratitude or at least relief. But instead, the man looked around in disbelief, tears silently gathering in his eyes. His name was Anthony Reynolds, and he had once lived a very different life, a successful businessman who lost everything after being betrayed by the people he trusted. In one devastating year, his company collapsed, his marriage ended, and his world unraveled until he found himself on the streets, unnoticed and forgotten. He had reached the point where he no longer expected help from anyone. Until now, Anthony stayed with Daniel and Emily for weeks as he recovered, though Daniel insisted he owed them nothing. The small apartment, once quiet and solemn, began to fill with warmth again. There were moments when Daniel would catch Emily laughing with Anthony as he attempted to make her silly pancake shapes he wasn't very good at creating. There were times when Daniel and Anthony spoke late into the night, sharing stories of loss, mistakes, regrets, and the fragile beauty of hope. Word spread in the neighborhood of what Daniel had done, leaving everyone stunned. People who barely noticed him before now looked at him with admiration. But Daniel never felt he did anything extraordinary. He simply did what he wished someone would do for him if he were in that position. And that humility, that unwavering goodness, etched itself into Anthony's heart. When Anthony regained his strength and finally decided it was time to rebuild his life, he didn't leave quietly. He left with a promise he took seriously. Weeks later, Daniel received a letter inviting him to a restored community center downtown. Confused but curious, Daniel and Emily went. What they saw left them speechless. The center had been rebuilt with Anthony's money, dedicated to helping single parents, struggling families, and homeless individuals, because kindness had brought him back from the edge, and he wanted that light to spread. At the opening ceremony, Anthony publicly thanked Daniel and Emily for saving not only his life but his faith in humanity. Daniel stood there overwhelmed, holding Emily close, realizing that the smallest act of compassion had sparked a chain reaction far beyond what he ever imagined. Anthony became a close part of their lives, a friend, a mentor, almost family. And Daniel, who once walked home in the rain feeling invisible, realized he had changed the world simply by choosing kindness on a dark night. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us of the goodness still left in the world. And